Good afternoon, Borda. Welcome to this DG&S committee meeting. It's the last of 2023, this financial year. My name is David Selway. I'm the Vice Chair and I'm temporarily standing in for Rowan Gardner, the Chair, who's been temporarily delayed, but will appear shortly and resume the role of Chair. But in the interest of time, I'll kick the meeting off. I'll ask committee members to introduce themselves when they speak, when they come in on the agenda. But I would like to extend a warm welcome to Sam Lloyd, our Executive Director of Operations, who joins this committee for the very first time. He's new in post. Sam, would you just like to say a few words before we press on?
Thank you, David. Yes, just Sam, very pleased to be here. Looking forward to taking an active role in the group and working with everyone. Thank you. Great,
thanks. You're welcome. There will be a private session where we will discuss matters relating to cybersecurity or commercial conflict of interest, or sorry, commercial interest or commercially sensitive items. Otherwise, the full papers for this session are available on our website, and we will be recording this session and making it available so that people can observe proceedings. We will have a short break, probably around 3 or 5, or maybe a little bit later, based on the delayed start. Carwyn Lloyd-Jones, our Director of ICT, has an urgent dental appointment, so we'll step out briefly during the course of the afternoon. And we will be joined by Jamie Graham to talk about the cybersecurity in Carwyn's absence. Moving on to apologies for absence. Chris, I can't see any in the meeting notes. Are there any apologies that you're aware of?
None that I'm aware of, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Declarations of interest. Could I just ask if anybody has got any declarations that they haven't already made or related to topics that are likely to come up today?
Hello, Chair. It's Rowan speaking. How are you? I'm sorry, everybody, I'm late. David, I did think it would be a good idea if we made the declaration of interest that was minuted in the last meeting regarding my role as Precision Life and your ability to step in when I'm conflicted, which or indeed IT challenged, as I've just been. As a bit of a standing item in this section, if you don't mind, Chair. Thank you.
No problem. Do you want to resume the chair now, Rob?
Well, why don't you just get to the end of the consent agenda and then maybe that's the point to step in.
Right. Okay. In terms of matters arising, I've not been made of any matters arising. Unless anybody's got anything they wish to raise now, I will move on to the consent agenda. Okay, I'll assume we're good to go. Right, moving on to the consent agenda. The first topic is the minutes of the last meeting. We have two versions of that. There's the full set of minutes and there's a bridged set, which is a bit shorter. I've not been made aware in advance of any comments on those. I personally don't have any observations on them, but I will pause. Ridian, I think you may have something you wanted to add.
Yeah, just a correction on page 10. It reads currently International Patient Standards. It's the International Patient Passport Standards. It should be, there's a word missing.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks, Ridian. Anything else, or was that just one observation? Okay, great. Thanks. So I'll take the minutes as an approved, subject to that small amendment that Ridian's just made us aware of. Moving on to the forward work plan, I'll hand over to the Board Secretary, Chris Charlin, to take us through this topic.
Yeah, the forward work plan, David's on just for noting. I wasn't going to pull out anything. We've got later on the cycle of business, which is on for approval of items planned for the next 12 months. So just asking committee members to note the forward work plan.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And if you could move us on to terms of reference as well, please.
Yeah, the terms of reference are on for approval. They draw committee members' attention to the addition of research and innovation as the one area that's been added to the terms of reference. And the assurance report today reflects that. So I think important to include that going forward. The other changes are minimal in terms of date changes, etc. So that's the only significant change for committee members to be aware of.
Okay, great. Thanks, Greg. I did have one observation, which was in section 7.1 about the membership of the committee. The executive director of strategy has attended in the past. I wasn't sure whether he was meant to be a permanent member of the committee or just coming in for various topics. Michelle?
Sorry, I jumped in quickly there with my hand, Chris. I don't know where you were going there. So I have spoken to Ivan, so who the executive director of strategy. So I'm attending for him this afternoon, if that's acceptable.
Okay.
Sorry, I should have said that at the beginning.
No problem, Michelle. Delighted to have you.
Thank you,
And David, just
okay,
on that point,
yeah,
just for clarification, members of the committee are the independent members. So yourself, Marilyn and Rowan. It's an independent-led committee. Officers are here in attendance for their items, just to make that distinction.
Okay, great. That's good clarification. Thank you, Chris. Okay, so moving on to the cycle of business, and Chris, could you cover that briefly?
Yeah, again, as part of our standing orders, we need to make sure we have a cycle of business in place for the following 12 months. We've liaised with Ridian as the executive lead for this committee to sense check the items that should be programmed in for the next year are, as mentioned, R&I has been added as a topic for the committee, reflected in the cycle of business and the terms of reference. And I know Julie wants to make one point of clarification, so I'll bring Julie in on the terms on that.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, just one really minor point. There's reference to the health and care standards on the first page. That should actually be replaced by quality standards 2023 now, which are taking over from them, and they've been introduced by the duty of quality. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Judy, for that clarification. We'll amend that. Moving on then to item 2.5, the committee effectiveness self-assessment. Chris, anything you want to pull out of that?
No, again, it's there for notes. I think it's important to recognise the positive feedback in terms of the open discussions and chairing of the committee over the last year that's been noted within the self-assessment. So that's positive through that assessment.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris. And last two items on the consent agenda, the annual committee report and the health and care standards. Is there anything you want to draw our attention to there, Chris, or should we move on to the main agenda?
Yeah, no, happy that if committee members are happy to endorse the annual committee report, then that'll go to board in March, and the health and care standards are for noting.
Excellent. Okay, great. Thank you, Chris. Okay, so we'll move on to the main agenda. First item is 3.1 action log, at which point I will hand over to our capable chair, Rowan, to take over.
Thank you. Great job there, David, and much appreciated. It's always embarrassing when the chair of the committee has IT issues, and I can only reassure our Chief Medical Officer that I haven't flung the PC out of the window. It is safe and on my desk, so there's no potential issues around information governance, which I know we will be talking about later on the agenda. So with that, thank you for your patience, everyone. And could we move to the first item on the main agenda, which is going to be led by Chris, which is for discussion and noting, which is our action log. And there are currently 2 open actions in the public domain, both of which are underway. So Chris, I invite you just to take us through that, please.
Yeah, so the first one relates to R&I, and I was going to check with Rachel, actually. I think this is potentially closed now that the terms of reference are updated and routine reporting will come through this committee, but yeah. I'll check with Rach.
Yeah, and I can touch on that a little bit further when I provide my R&I update. Thanks, Chris.
The second point relates to the data promise, and in the next item I was going to bring Darren in to give us a full update on that, because it's one of our key risks that we've been discussing over previous committees. So if you're comfortable with that, Chair, then I'll bring Darren in for the next item.
That sounds very straightforward. Is anyone else worried about any omissions or anything on the action log? Anything to note? No. Okay, then we'll move swiftly on to item 3.2, corporate risk register. Chris, do you want to lead this and then bring in colleagues as appropriate? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Yeah, so I will do a quick summary of where we're at in terms of risks that have been assigned to the committee, and then there are just a couple that I think we want to pause on and just give a full update to committee members. So there's 9 public risks assigned to the Digital Governance and Safety Committee. They are included in item 3.2i within the papers. I will run through quickly some of the changes in risks since we last met as a committee, and I'm going to focus on those assigned to the committee. We have included those assigned to the Audit and Assurance Committee, so you're cited on all the risk changes, but I'm just going to focus on the Digital Governance and Safety Committee risks. In terms of new risks, 0299 has been added, supplier capacities to support the electronic prescription service readiness activities. That's the first new one assigned to this committee. And the second one is DHCW 0300, which is the CANISC screening and palliative care risk, which has been added since we last met as a committee. There's 8 risks that have been removed since the last meeting. Again, I'm just going to run through those relating to this committee. So DHCW 0295, lack of resources to implement key IMTP milestones. That's been mitigated down to directorate level. The original CANISC risk 0204, that's been taken off, but obviously noting that the screening and palliative care risk has essentially replaced that risk. There's a private risk which we'll discuss in the or note in the private session of the meeting in terms of risks that's come off. And the last one is the DHCW 0294 service ownership and resource commitment not agreed for the NHS Wales app. That's been reduced to directorate level as private beta continues to work on and learn lessons in terms of the service wrap moving forward. Sorry, there was one other, DHCW 0291, network delays in equipment in relation to data center 2 move. That's been removed since the last meeting as well. So I'm just going to pick out 3 areas that I want the committee just to have a bit of focus on, and then if there's questions on any other risks, happy to take those and bring colleagues in. The first one is DHCW 0269, the switching service. Now, we've discussed this as a committee a few times, and we've had some meetings outside of committee to review this risk. We've recently had an internal audit report into the switching service, which I think helpfully has allowed us to consider the risk and the approach we want to take to mitigating it. And I'm going to hand over to Carl, and no doubt Rachel will want to come in as well and input to this one, just in terms of the approach we're planning to take to the switching service, because it does span a number of operational areas. So Carwyn, do you want to run through how, based on the feedback from the audit report, how we're planning to approach this?
Yeah, shall I do the fault domain one first?
Yeah, you can do. So just for, so fault domains and the data promise, as mentioned earlier, the other 2 I want to focus on. Yeah, happy that you do that.
So fault domains are, it's quite simple. It's one we've now closed, but between the extract being made for this meeting and today. So we were waiting on us completing our migration from our old Hyper-V environment to our new VMware VxRail environment, and that work concluded a few weeks ago. So we've now closed the risk. So the risk is one that's been open for a while, and there's a couple of things that we've improved, the resilience that we've got within each data center, the LIMS system being one of them, and then that virtual server farm, which runs a lot of our services, being the other. So we've closed it and said, if we've got any specific other things that people are worried about, or we've got concerns over them, we will raise other risks as appropriate. But that one has now been closed. So because we've completed that migration work.
Well,
right.
that's great to hear. So let's just pause on the success of getting a long-standing risk closed off, and thank you very much for that. Chris, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a similar point, Rowan. This was one of the risks where, when we had the analysis at the last meeting around long-standing risks that we were struggling to mitigate, this was on that list. So it is really pleasing to see this come off. It's been on for 18 months.
Okay, right. The next one, the switching service. So I'll just start quickly with this. So the audit report that we've received made a few recommendations. One was that we needed to split the risk that's on the corporate risk register into more specific risks, so that different elements could be managed differently, and we could manage risk better by doing that. So that was one of the actions. The other action was that we needed to improve the documentation on any disaster recovery procedures for the switching service. So as people will probably be familiar, the switching service is a very old service, developed probably initially more than 20 years ago, and has had minor incremental developments since. So it's classified as an admin standard service, so it doesn't have resilience across data centers in the way that more of our other services would have these days. So we've taken two actions, if you like, in respect to that. One is to do the updating the disaster recovery documentation, just to focus on the restore process should we need it in the first data center. But we've also agreed to look at whether there are any options available to us now that would give us the ability to provide better resilience across data centers. So some kind of hot standby arrangement, which we think may be possible because of an upgrade to the operating system that we've done as part of our removal of legacy operating system work. So that's another one that's got a slightly longer time to achieve it. The third one, so this third element, was in terms of having business continuity arrangements in place within the information services team, because a lot of what the switching service does in an automatic way can be done manually by the integration services team, and they have done that when the service has failed previously. But it needed better documentation around that so that any member of the team would be able to do it. So that's an action that's just been agreed to be added as well. And then the final one is about actually looking at the replacement of the switching service, because everything that we have talked about so far is about just shoring up arrangements around what we've got already. And there's a sort of working assumption that the NDR, the National Data Resource Program, the data analytics platform or whatever that's implemented as part of that program, will undertake the role that the switching service currently undertakes. But that hasn't yet been agreed, or hadn't, when we last spoke about it, agreed with the NDR program yet. So that's one of the other actions, is to firm up specifically what the arrangements are around the actual replacement of the switching service. So I'll hand over to Rachel, because she will know more about that last one than I do.
Well, you summarised that really nicely, Carolyn, so very little to add from me, other than to say I think we've got that working assumption now that NDR have confirmed they will replace the switching service. So that in itself is quite a positive step, actually, because we've been assuming that position for a long time, but we've had that confirmed. I think the date of when that will be implemented is what needs to be firmed up now. And I know we've had some ongoing correspondence, which helpfully has been pushed actually as a result of the internal audit review. But I know that NDR are looking to confirm that through their NDR programme governance structures to ensure that they can develop a robust plan for when they will incorporate replacement of the switching service into that. That was all I wanted to add. And it's going to Audit and Assurance Committee, sorry, in a couple of weeks as well. The management response with the actions and contained within.
So, any comment on that? On what we've heard? I'd just like to kind of just highlight, Kerwin, the advantage of maintaining current operating systems and allowing us to upgrade. That's very a positive thing for all of us to hear. And the second point is the documentation still in process, or is it being completed in terms of the restore and?
Not sure. We gave 3 months to be able to do it. So in terms of doing that, I'm not sure how far progressed if the different elements are.
Okay. Well, I hope to hear confirmation it's been completed. Well, I will, I'm sure, given the capabilities of the people around the table here, that it's been completed by the next one. If we could just make sure that action and request for confirmation, that's a good update. So thank you for that, both of you. Chris, there was a third risk that you wanted to dive into.
Yeah, and it's the another one that we've discussed a few times in this committee. It's a data promise. So Darren, if you're happy to update, because I know there's been some correspondence with Welsh Government on this one.
Yes, thanks, Chris. Just for the record, I'm the Associate Director for Information Governance and Patient Safety. Just to give you an update on reference 264, there's been some recent correspondence around the setting of what is described as a data promise. So just to give a bit of an indication of what that entails, is the promise is a set of outcomes, I suppose, from the service to assure patients and the public about their use of data that is part of the prerequisite requirement of their health and their treatment and their care within the health and social care service. So it's effectively how we administer controls and how we administer requirements for information held about those individuals. So the promise is a set criteria that will allow organisations to demonstrate those controls and to make certain assurances to those individuals that information is being used appropriately and under of the many circumstances by which it is required, both at the direct care level and for then part of that element that we do require about improving services within inside health and social care. So there's a number of corresponding actions from that there are some dependencies on us being able to do that. It's within strategy with the Welsh Government and some of the white papers around about having a conversation with members of the public to assure them on all of those aspects. So the data promise was the headline of that kind of narrative, I suppose. More recently, there's been some understanding that the data promise, parts of those component parts have to come from the service. The ownership of what that promise is comes from a government policy position, but some of that ownership has to come from the service because it has the mechanisms in order to help demonstrate those aspects. More recently, there's been a meeting with Welsh Government, their Chief Digital Officer, their Head of Policy and their Deputy Director of Digital Policy and Delivery within Welsh Government to understand where the responsibility falls for delivering some of those aspects. To the start, in terms of where there may be Welsh Government policy required to reinforce that provision, i.e. a mechanism to understand aspects like the health and social care's responsibility around confidentiality, what its responsibility is around robust records management, what its responsibility is around some of those aspects that give us that governance. The other element is about being able to surface and socialise what that promise is. What does it actually mean to members of the public to assure them across those things? So that is another set of actions which Welsh Government can take forward to a certain extent, but where Welsh Government, where we've been having a conversation with DHCW, may be able to help and assist under those circumstances. The other aspect is the tooling required so that organisations can dip into that tooling and be able to absolutely say that they are meeting the expectations of those members of the public, i.e. we can provide assurance by these mechanisms. We support the safeguards that we have because we can demonstrate those things. So there are a number of different pillars to those actions. So more recently, those conversations about where the responsibility falls within a government space and within a service space, and DHCW being in the middle of some of those responsibilities. So that those conversations are around how we resource those up, how we use the resources we currently have within our own organisation, our own statutory organisation, and where we need to pull resources from health and social care to deliver that campaign as it's being described. So there's actions back on Welsh Government to come back with a plan of all of those things and where those pillars need to be fulfilled and what order and under what circumstances in the timeline to be able to do these things. So that's kind of a quick run through in terms of that particular risk and how it's developed since that risk's been raised.
So that was a great summary, Darren. I can see David's got his hand up, I think if anyone, yeah, we do have people who dial into this call and listen to the recordings, and you know, I think a lot of us don't necessarily think about what happens to information when we're actually booking an appointment or going to a GP or attending. But yeah, information flows across the service, and very similar to the way our banking information flows through the banking process. And you know, when we think in the banking context, we all know all of these pieces of the puzzle exist, and just getting that conversation with the public on how that relates to health, I think, is going to be very interesting. So, David, you had some comments.
I do. Thanks, Rowan, and thanks, Darren, for the update. Comprehensive as usual. I do have a couple of questions based on what you said. So first question, I'll give you all the questions and you can choose how you want to answer them. So the first question is, sounds like a complicated process we're going to have to get through before we've actually got it in place, which is obviously going to take time. From a DHCW perspective, in terms of the things that we would like to do once this is in place, is there a date at which, if it goes beyond that, it starts to hold up things that we've got planned either around NDR or our R&I strategy? So is there a window to get it done beyond which it starts to compromise some of the work that we got planned? That's the first question. You mentioned some additional tooling might be required. So is that tooling over and above what we've got in place for information governance at the moment? And you also mentioned, possibly, if I understood you correctly, possibly the need for some additional resource. And I was just clarifying, is that something that you can absorb within your current team, or do we need to expand your team in order to make sure that we have the appropriate processes in place for governing this data promise?
Thanks, David. I'll answer those questions in order. So I'll recall them because they are in a very good order, actually. So in terms of the dependencies, then, as you quite rightly point out there, they're not necessarily absolute dependencies. They are more opportunities that may be missed as a result of not being able to have those conversations with, or being able to actually assure that what we want to do in those particular fields and those particular areas, that it's that part of the navigation of a conversation with individuals is clear. So, for instance, in terms of the national data resource, the outcome from the national data resource is to be able to use information in a more collaborative way, and in a way that helps to inform service provision and service improvement. So what comes with that is some of the early phases of the NDR arguably are part of normal provision, the things that we do on a day-to-day basis, and the things that we already do, and the mechanisms we already have to ensure individuals that those things are happening. It's about the new areas and the new places that we need to go with information about those individuals around, like I say, service provision, improvements, those type of things. There's also the element that falls into Rachel's responsibilities, I suppose, in terms of the R&I strategy, the research and innovation space, which is really quite key and really important to that, because they are the fields that are that really make the difference in terms of service outcomes and individual outcomes as well. So there are dependencies to it. The timeframes are going to be quite long on some of this, and it's about this. It's about the service being able to probably do this in a phased approach. so that as we're phasing through some of these priorities, that we phase that as part of that communication back to the public. I haven't got any tangible timelines at the moment, because that's part of the plan of trying to put that together and parallel that with all of those, some of those dependencies on some of that program work, because it's not just national data resource. We have strategic program for primary care, for instance. We have lots of large programs. Welsh Community Care Information System are all, in part, have some layer of dependency on having being able to make available a much more tangible conversation with those members of the public. So that's one response. The tooling aspect, we do have a good element of some of that within a certain distribution of the service, for instance. So from DHCW's responsibilities, we have things like the Wales Accord for Sharing Personal Information, which is a demonstrable aspect. We have our Information Governance Toolkit. We have a concept of what learning and development means around information governance. We have controls on access to electronic systems that holding health information, those type of things. So they are mature in some areas and immature in other areas, and they need to expand into other parts of the service that may want to use them to demonstrate compliance. So that requires some work and some understanding how that runs in parallel, then again with that conversation and that deliberative conversation with members of the public. Thirdly, then, there's a resourcing element. Clearly, we need to move along with that chain of events quickly in some areas and slower in the others, because they kind of run concurrently. So from our perspective, then there will be some resources, one to deliver the data promise as it's being described, or the components or the products outside of that. Welsh Government are fully aware of that, and then to mature some of that tooling so that organisations can call upon them if they want to, but sometimes where they are required to call upon them as well, as a part of a prerequisite set of frameworks that they have to respond to and be able to demonstrate as well that they have a compliance layer. So that's kind of a response. All of those things are required in terms of resourcing, and that maturity of some of that tooling as well is required.
Okay, thanks, Dan. That's a comprehensive answer. My supplementary question would be, if push comes to shove, you'll probably find a way of doing it within the resources you've got at the moment, but that might actually take us a little bit longer to get through everything that you've described. So could we just sort of keep an eye on that, and if additional resources required, then it's flagged up to Ridian in the first instance, and maybe we could be made aware of it if it becomes a bit of an issue in terms of getting to a safe place the other side of this process.
I can pick up one of those elements in my later report on information governance, which talks about the Wales Accord for Sharing Personal Information. So I can pick up one component of that in terms of the resourcing, if that's helpful.
Okay, thanks, Darren.
Thank you. And Darren, I know your job is made a little bit more difficult on this, in that there's parallel conversations going on in the NHS in England, and you know, trying to keep those separate in everyone's minds is going to be important. So thank you very much for that. If there are no more comments, Chris, are you happy that the risk you've had the conversation on the three areas? Really pleased, by the way, to see so many risks dropping off the risk register. So well done, everyone. That's really heartening. Michelle, can I invite you to take us through the instant review and organisational learning report, which is next on the agenda, please? Thank you.
Yep. Good afternoon. Thank you, Rowan. I'm going to definitely hand over to one of my colleagues, if you don't mind. So Keith Reeves, who members of the committee will recognise, actually puts the report together for us and is my deputy chair, I think, and coordinator, and does a lot of the work around the group. So I'd like to hand over to Keith, if that's okay. Thanks, Rowan.
Welcome, Keith. Michelle. Your opportunity to make Michelle look good here, I think.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Michelle. So really, just want to run through the instant review and learning group report. Just some of the key highlights. So one of the areas that we focus on is around the national reportable incidents and early warning notifications. So just to be aware that we had one reportable incident during that time. At the time of the writing of the report, the incident was still under investigation and review. So Hopefully for next quarter, we should have the review report coming through to the IRLG. The review activity, whilst it is less than previous quarters, we've taken the opportunity to start to look at more thematic reviews. So these are looking at multiple incidents where there is a perceived common theme running through them. So this could be a failure that's happened over a period of months, and then identifying, okay, well, what was the root cause behind that, and was there anything that we could have done better to mitigate against all three, rather than just doing individual incident reviews. The other reviews, just as a point of clarity, so again, within incident review and learning group, we also look at the learning from other sources. So things like post-implementation reviews or user feedback, or if an area of DHCW has undertaken some good work, we like to get them in front of the learning group to just promote that good work. So within the last quarter, we've had the National Service Desk come and present to us around how they manage their user feedback, and also the approach that they take to lessons learned. So it was a very, very useful session with them. We did also have one complaint that was received, which was responded to by the primary care team within DHCW. Going on to the outcomes of those reviews, I'm very, very pleased to say that we are on track with our quality improvement action list recommendations that are all recorded on there. So for the quarter three, we have no outstanding actions. We do have quite a few which are due for the end of quarter four. So hopefully we'll be moving those forward and completing on a lot of those. And then the final section is around the actual common themes and the major improvements that we've implemented. So one of the previous improvements that we were working on from sort of quarter two to quarter three was about our major incident management processes and how DHCW responds to major incidents. There was a working group that's been set up, and we've implemented a number of improvements in there, including some of the recommendations that were coming out around awareness training and overview training. I'm pleased to say that we're pushing that forward, and now 62% of staff that are on the bronze, silver, gold rota have now attended these sessions, and we're going to be pushing those forward into quarter four and also into the next financial year. So as more people get involved within bronze, silver and gold, then we'll look to give them the overview training. We're also looking at additional training which is more process specific, which will then be able to help with competencies and their awareness of, especially with some of the less operational people. We've developed some role profiles, again for the incident commanders and also for the service desk, and we've also been looking at communication processes along the way, because this was a significant area of improvement, and the service desk they've taken this forward and they've developed a number of processes which they are then leading on. The planned improvements on quarter four, so we've had a test of the major incident processes that was undertaken last week, so we're still waiting a lessons learned report from that. But we're also looking at the resourcing of the rotas and also the way that we've got a number of rotas in different places, how we can rationalize those. We are moving that into 2023, 2024, but looking at what systems we can put in place to identify the efficiencies from that. The second improvement that we've commenced on is to look at the tool set for reviewers. And one of the big frameworks that we've looked to adapt is based around the NHS, or formerly NHS Improvements, contributory factors framework. So this is a framework of to identify what the contributory factors are around patient safety and clinical incidents, but the mechanisms behind it, we've looked to adapt the questioning to fit within a digital organization. And part of that is to first of all retrospectively look at the incidents that we've had in the last year, and there is a summary within the report itself, but that identifies where the failure domains are, and then goes down to another level of detail of looking at sort of themes, the common themes again there. And from that, we then look at what learning we can get from it, what improvements we can put in place to hopefully reduce those themes going forward. So I think that's very much a whistle-stop tour of the report. Are there any questions?
No, that sounded like it was very comprehensive, and you have a good plan and it's being executed. I had one question, which was you had the I think just over 60% of people who'd taken those training courses. Do you have a target that we want to complete by the end of the year?
By the end of the year, I'm looking at
calendar the financial year rather than calendar year.
Yeah. So I'm actually looking at 75%. So anything above that is going to be absolutely brilliant. But I do run these courses monthly. So, and as new people come into the organisation, then I invite those to come on to those training, or I deliver them as a one-to-one approach. Because what I don't want to do is to ensure that people go onto this rota without having that level of training. And I also have people that have been on a rota previously that may never have experienced an incident. So it's that refresher, which is why I'm sort of aiming at 75% by the end of this year. But then for next year, I would look at it again and see, probably hope to push that out wider.
I definitely support that. Thank you, Keith.
Yeah.
A couple of hands were going up there. Michelle, I think yours was first.
Thank you, Rowan. I just wanted to add to what Keith was saying. Thank you, Keith. It's a really well supported group, actually, the Incident Review and Learning Group. And as the committee will know, we've been growing over the time. And I think it's really helpful that we've got more of a focus now on the theme. So that kind of section at the end, the thematic review, is something we'll be spending more time on in the group. And I know it's something that's been raised by the committee in previous conversations as well. It's that kind of bigger picture, isn't it? And wider learning. And also, we are very good, I think, and we have good mechanisms around particularly our technical reviews, because we've got a good process and report around those. It's the broadening then in terms of the wider learning opportunities. They were looking at things like project closure reports, lessons learned, etc. So we've looked at some of those areas, and it's just trying to raise that across the organisation. So that's something that we're definitely working on, isn't it, Keith, in terms of our agenda. And as I say, we've got representatives from right across the organisation, so it's a really good forum to get underneath some of those issues.
Excellent, and I'm really pleased to hear that. So thank you, both of you. If there's no more comments, there don't appear to be. Let's move swiftly on to the assurance reports. And the first one is IG assurance report. So Darren, the floor is yours again. Welcome back.
Thank you, Rowan. So I'll just go some of the salient points again in terms of the report. I won't go into any detail, but obviously welcome any questions as a result of that process. So so the report just briefly gives the committee some indication and on previous conversation about some of our responsibility and what we're committing to do in terms of understanding our responsibilities for some of those tooling that I described, things like the Information Governance Toolkit, Wales Code for Sharing Personal Information, our National Intelligent Integrated Audit Solution. That part of being a recognised action at the currently on myself in terms of building the strategy around how we develop those products and those services for an outwardly facing. So that's some of the aspects that there's an action currently to actually develop the IG strategy, both for our internal needs and for external visibility as well. The other element is about the Wales Accord for Sharing Personal Information being one of those aspects. So this is a pursuit or a wish that we put WASPI, as it's termed for short, through what's described as a code of conduct. So for WASPI to become a code of conduct. Now, a code of conduct is something that is sponsored by the Information Commissioner's Office. So it allows organisations to use and to utilise that in order to increase the trust, the visibility and the transparency of what organisations are doing under a particular aspect of the General Data Protection Regulations. That is then presided over by the Commissioner effectively. But WASPI in its current form is a voluntary, it's got a voluntary status to it. So basically what it means is organisations can subscribe to it, but they're not necessarily measured against their performance as to whether they're using what is within WASPI, essentially a set of products and services that allow for effective information sharing for a particular purpose. So for instance, there's a mechanism by which safe information sharing can be done, and there's loads of prerequisites to make sure that is effective. So to give you an example, WASPI has been very engaged and very successful in aspects of policy such as child and adult protection, the surfacing of things like Flying Start, aspects of teams around the family, aspects of multidisciplinary teams in order to protect children and adults. So WASPI has framed information sharing requires of multiple agencies and understanding what their responsibilities are when they're doing the sharing. It doesn't resolve some of the legal considerations, but it creates a framework for those organisations to do this thing. So WASPI has been through a 10 to 12-year journey of implementation and surfacing some of that impact. So what we want to do is bring WASPI into next phase, which is to create it as part of a code, which means that organisations have more of a responsibility to demonstrate their compliance around using that particular framework, which we feel is part of what we're describing around the data promise. It allows more trust and transparency about what's doing in that context. So this is sponsored by Welsh Government because it is at the heart of that is Welsh Government policy and how that operates in those areas that I've described, which is just one example. So what we're doing is building WASPI to become a code with the Information Commissioner's Office. We've already done a lot of engagement with the ICO to see if it is a candidate for that. And the ICO have given us positive indication that the work to date that we've done over the previous 10 years and the work we've done over the last couple of years ideally sits it as part of that, of becoming a code and becoming a part of that kind of ICO code requirement. DHCW would be in the middle of that because it's responsible for delivering WASPI as a service. So the current actions is we have to go out to consultation for this to understand whether there is need and whether there's a requirement to do that, whether organisations would to subscribe under the terms of a code rather than it be under this current circumstances. So there's two things that are happening. One, there's an internal engagement activity and an event, and independent members may receive an invite at some point in time in order to understand what that is exactly, sponsored again by partly by Welsh Government, but with the ICO on board. The other element then is after that internal event is an external consultation via Welsh Government mechanisms to understand what the service is and what the public think of that as becoming part of this tooling, but to move it on into the next phase. So that's quite a really important piece of work. And David, coming back to those aspects you described, there will be resourcing requirements around that in order to take it into the next phase. But for my strong belief is this is where we need to go with that transparency and that element, in that kind of assurance to members of the public. WASPI is very much front and centre of that. So that's kind of the work. That's the work that we're doing, and I can elaborate on that and provide more information to DGNS as that kind of moves forward around that consultation process, which will take a number of weeks. I think the standard consultation process from Welsh Government leading that is about an 8 to 10 week period anyway. So the findings and the facts for that will come into play. I wanted to centre in on that because that's quite an important piece of work that's happening at the moment. The other aspects that come with that is just the standard reports. Again, we are at the heart of what we do is privacy. Everything that we design at the heart of some of those aspects that we design or we procure or we have responsibility for is data privacy. So we put together and we're responsible for a lot of data protection impact assessments. There is an indication of just the level of activity of privacy understanding of all of those products that is within the report. An indication just of our calls that we have in terms of our advice service and the other things where we're looking internally and externally where we provide the advice. We've had one incident logged. It's a minor incident around the retention of data within a file that should have been removed. There was no exposure to that data, but it was in an internal repository. So it's not a high-level incident. It's just an observed incident about ensuring that business practice is properly organised. Our FOIs, our Freedom of Information Act responsibilities are ongoing, and we've got some metrics on that. And that's about it basically. But the main centre of the thing is some of our current activity around what we are doing to develop some of that tooling to allow organisations to help to demonstrate the compliance.
That's excellent, Darren, and you know the move to bring WASPI as into a code under the ICO is I think really valuable. It adds luster to what we're doing, and also you know is reassurance. And I think you know the general public being aware of actually the long-term investment in shaping and building out WASPI is really important for Wales, particularly as you just said, you know. Quite often this data needs to be shared through multidisciplinary teams because the people who are receiving care are often our most vulnerable at that point, whether it be in the formal healthcare or the social care setting. So I look forward to hearing more about that at subsequent DGNS. But great example of leadership being shown in DGNS. Thank you for that, Darren. And with that, I'm going to ask Paul, which is lovely to see you again, Paul, to report on the informatics assurance report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, I'm Paul Evans, and I'm the Interim Head of Quality Assurance and Regulatory Compliance.
Thank you, Paul.
So I just briefly report on what's been a busy period for WIAG. We've received 6 assurance quality plans, 1 request for change, and 16 safety case and readiness reports in the period. A number of these are still moving through the approval process, and a few have been pushed back to project managers for some clarification. Project timescales. There is 1 paper for the DSPP's NHS Wales app private beta that still requires some retrospective assurance. Go Live went ahead on this one due to project timescales, but the retrospective work is nearing completion, and we've got a proper process mapped out with the SPP now to ensure that WIAG engagement happens at an early stage with the next developments. Forward planning, the current quarter is looking slightly less busy than the previous one. We've reviewed 5 papers in total to date, with just 1 paper and 4 show and tells booked in for the rest of the quarter so far. I expect that to increase certainly during March, but certainly much quieter than the current period. And that's it in summary, Chair. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Thank you, Paul. And that was a really good report. David has a question.
Thanks, Paul. Just a bit of clarification around the retrospective approval for DSPP. What happened there? Why are we having to do that retrospectively? Was there some breakdown in communication somewhere?
I wouldn't say breakdown in communication, David. I'd say perhaps some initial confusion around the assurance route. The DSPP programme has set up their own internal assurance, which is incredibly robust, to be fair to them. What was missed in early stages was how that fitted in with the WIAG process, but that's now been bottomed out, and whilst we're carrying out the remaining retrospective assurance on the private beta, the next phase, which is the public beta, is currently going through WIAG with an assurance quality. So it was a bit of an oversight that certainly has been resolved and won't happen again.
Okay, great, lovely. Thanks for the clarification.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul, and that's good to hear. And I think that's something that has caused some confusion for me around other large projects in the past, which have their own project governance and then their impact on the governance processes within DHCW. So, you know, good to see that that's being resolved. You know, the lumpy bumpiness of the work is I think you know, so it's just one of those things. But you spoke about some of the reports having to be sent back for further clarification. You know, generally, how well is it understood what information needs to be provided for your purposes within and across the organisation?
I'd like to think that's an ever improving area. So what we're trying to get from the various assurance leads on WIAG at the moment is almost a checklist of the standard things that they would request of a project. So my WIAG facilitator is then going to pull together a bit of a document pack for project managers, and she's developing some training to go alongside that. So it gives project managers an early indication of the kind of assurance requests that are likely to come from the currently 18 different assurance areas. Obviously, they'll be tailored on a case-by-case basis if there's specific requirements for a particular project. But in general, we hope to get this pack together within the next quarter, and then some training rolled out for project managers and anybody else who's interested in the WIAG process to give them a clearer understanding of certainly the general requirements that apply across all projects.
Excellent, and that sort of speaks to me about the organisation's maturity and developing and improving, and that's really good to hear. So thank you. Next, the Information Services Assurance Report from Rachel, please.
Thank you. So I'm Rachel Powell, Associate Director for Information Intelligence and Research, and I'm going to be taking the Information Assurance and R&I Assurance reports, and I'll start with information first. So committee members will be familiar that at the last quarter previously updated on the intention for information services to move to a new system by which we manage new work requests and how we deal with the work that the team is involved with. And we've started to pilot that new system now with our information programme management team, which is quite useful, and we've been having discussions with other teams across DHCW about how we can incorporate some of the processes to try and streamline that as much as possible. The other useful factor to keep in mind is that NDR are also going to be utilising the same system. So as we merge some of our services and some of the data sets, etc., into NDR, it's useful to have that ongoing arrangement and to facilitate any smooth ways of working as far as we possibly can. Linked to that, we also continue with the ISD NDR operational group, where we've started to tease out things like the switch and service and trying to work out some tangible operational dates that we can start to put into place. So that group's persistent, and we liaise with colleagues on forthcoming work plans and things that's likely to be a bit of attention, or things that we need to give our attention to for those agendas. We're also continuing with the ISD service portfolio work. And although we had some dedicated service management report working on that specifically, that's come to an end now, unfortunately. And we have identified some resource within the team to take that work forward, supported by service management colleagues. So it's really important that we complete that work so that we are consistent with the service management approach across the organisation, and that our services are captured as part of that service portfolio as well. So almost completing those remaining service portfolio items, which is good. In terms of the ISD assurance group, we've had 8 assurance quality plans and 13 safety case readiness reports that were considered in the ISD assurance group, and we provided information services advice and drew out some requirements as a result of those things being taken to the assurance group. We also saw 5 projects that came and presented to the group, which is really important as well to promote timely engagement with information services, so we can be more engaged at the right stages of projects and ensure that the information requirements are captured at the right stage and that they're appropriate as well. Again, I've previously reported on DHCW's responsibility, as an official stats publishing body at previous committee meetings. We took a paper to directors a couple of weeks ago, actually, just to lay out exactly what those responsibilities mean for us as an organisation and what our options are in terms of compliance with those new requirements. Quite a detailed list of options for directors to consider, and we have scheduled another discussion in March because I think it was quite a lot to take in and to consider what we think the appropriate approach is. But just to provide some further assurance in respect of that, the team is absorbing the initial must-do things, so we are motoring ahead and doing quite a lot in that space, but it's really thinking how we can ramp up and do more in terms of what we're offering as an organisation in that space. We've previously discussed the switching service internal audit report and risks, so I wasn't proposing to say too much more other than, as Carwyn quite rightly said, we've done a lot of work in terms of disaggregating the initial risk on the corporate risk register, which has been really useful to come up with some specific mitigating actions and how we can manage that risk more appropriately going forward. And I am pleased to report we have taken quite a few of those actions forward, so we are in a much stronger position following that internal audit report, and we can present on that at audit and assurance in a couple of weeks as well. And then finally, in terms of information assurance, I just wanted to provide an update on the corporate Power BI assurance process. Within the information services team, we take responsibility for corporate Power BI products on behalf of DHCW, and as such we've developed quite a robust process for how we can assure the products coming out. So whether they're developed within the team or whether they're developed across the organisation, we like to ensure that there's some consistency and that there's some general standards that all of those Power BI dashboards are compliant with, so we can ensure that it's a good standard before anything's published, and that's inclusive of the rest of the information services team. So we've tried to align to a similar process, and we've developed an app to monitor and keep an eye on that, and we're taking the paper to directors next week. It was meant to go yesterday, but we've had to postpone that to next week, so hopefully that'll be signed off and implemented very soon. So I'll pause there before I move on to research and innovation in case there's any questions.
So before we have the first research and innovations assurance report, David, do you have a question for Rachel on information?
I do. Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the update, Rachel. Just a little bit of clarification. The governance process that you've put in place, I'm assuming that's to manage the sort of flow of work into your organisation and to the NDR programme. If that's correct, what does the backlog look like at the moment in terms of our capacity to service the demand, and are we getting more demand than we're able to service? What's the balance look like from your perspective?
So just to clarify, the team's always had its own process for managing new service requests directly into the information services department. Some of the projects and programs as part of DHCW we service, and we're very much linked into those, but additionally we can deal with things completely separate to that come directly into the department independently of any other areas within DHCW. So that the new system that we've implemented, that's also been implemented by NDR, that's to improve and enhance that process that we already manage now currently, but the added benefit is that it gives NDR colleagues an opportunity to have that overarching view of what we're involved with, and likewise what they're involved with as well, so we can have those ongoing discussions about where we can transition some things over, etc. But yeah, the process and the new service request, that's always been managed previously within information services, that just hopefully this system will give us a little bit more ability to manage that better.
Okay, no, thanks for that. And what's the situation look like at the moment in terms of the flow of work that you're normally used to? Is it still the same level? So the process helps, but we're meeting the demand. Or what I'm trying to get to, is there a more demand than you have the capacity to service?
We are a very busy team. The system definitely helps, and I think we have to constantly manage our resource, and we have to be quite agile in terms of looking at the priorities. We've got particularly things like the official stats responsibilities that have come our way. We have no additional resource to deal with that currently, so we're looking at our list of commitments and our business as usual activities and thinking about how we can manage that with the cohort of staff that we've got and the skills that we've got to do that in the best way. So I would say we're a very busy team. We manage our work well, and extra resource would be wonderful, but I think we're realistic to understand the picture and how we can essentially prioritize our work to meet demand. But yeah, we're coping, I think, is the take home.
Okay, thanks, Rachel.
And Rachel, just on that demand point, how will that change as NDR comes online?
So I think some of this is to be worked through, but currently you'll be aware that we've got a data acquisition and data warehouse function within information services currently. You would envisage in the future that acquisition of data would be incorporated within the NDR landscape going forward, and then how that looks then for information services is yet to be bottomed out. But I think the expectation is that we will be a customer of the NDR in terms of the analytics stuff, which is, you know, where our skills really do lie. Actually, we can do more, and we can develop that side of things much better and do more in that space. Because we do spend quite a lot of time focusing on how we get data, curating that data, transforming it, making it usable. And then we can do the nice things like dashboards and providing the insight and analytics. But we spend an awful lot of time under the surface doing some of the activities that in an ideal world will be in NDR land going forward. So I think there will be some changes and some transformation to certainly my team. How that will look in the future, I think we're still in the territory where we're trying to design that and work out a plan for that going forward. But very much working closely with NDR to try and work through that.
Sounds excellent, and I have sympathy with the getting hold of data and transforming it and making sure it's of quality. And I think we look forward to times where you have a consistent source of data and you're on top of it, creating added value from it, and not just spending a lot of time bringing it together. So that's good to hear. Can I ask you to do the R&I report then next, or research and innovation? I shouldn't use abbreviations.
Yeah, so in respect of research and innovation then, in Q4, we've been spending an awful lot of time doing a thorough review of the governance and process that we need to embed as a result of establishing this new function on the back of our R&I strategy being approved. So we're very much in the next steps. It's great that we've got this R&I strategy that's been approved and signed off, but the hard work begins now in terms of developing the plan to support that. And some of the foundational steps, as I say, is around embedding a robust governance and process to really enable a lot of that, which is where we've been in. We haven't really been in that territory previously to support a lot of these activities. As part of that, we've been working really closely with Director of People and OD, and also we're Head of Strategic Engagement to ensure that, although this serves the purpose for research and innovation, we're also cognizant of the strategy for People and OD and the broader strategic engagement activities that's going on, and how we can be a bit more inclusive in some of what we're designing to suit more than one purpose. On the partnerships bit specifically, so in terms of this new governance structure that we're proposing, and the intention is that we will take something to directors by mid-February, so really by the end of Q4, I'm hoping that this will be embedded or will be signed off and we can start to embed. We are proposing to establish some new formal arrangements for managing some of the partnerships that we have with the likes of academia, so we can be a lot more clear on what our strategic priorities are going forward, work with those partners to really bottom out where the strengths and skills lies, both from their perspective and our perspective, and how we can be an effective partner, importantly, in those arrangements going forward. So as much as what we need to get from them, what they need to get from us, and how we can support that through this structure. And then linked to that as well, it's been really clear on where we're internal governance structures, and importantly, as Chris previously pointed out, the governance structure definitely plugs into DGNS committee as well. So you will see some of the outputs of all this work that we're putting together, but we must have clarity on prioritisation, on capacity and capability for where this work is and or isn't going to be supported, and also decision making. So we're very clear on where authority lies to say yes or no to some of these things going forward. The other thing I wanted to update DGNS committee on was the appointment of our new head of research and innovation. So we're really pleased that Rachel Jermaine started with us at the start of January. She brings with her a wealth of experience actually in leading an R&I function, and in terms of the work that we've got and that we've been developing on the governance in particular, Rachel's got some experience of developing a similar structure in the organisation that she previously came from, which was Llywodraethu. So we're utilising that expertise as much as we possibly can, and it's been a great addition to the team having Rachel on board. And then the final thing in terms of the work that we've been involved with, along with other teams within DHCW, we're developing some very specific milestones now, and as part of our business plan as well. How do we deliver against the R&I strategy? And we've been pulling out the specifics to really realise how we can see through that strategy, and what are the next steps in terms of taking that forward. And we've set ourselves some specific targets as well, which is useful. So how can we demonstrate success, and how can we improve and set a benchmark, and how can we aspire to be as ambitious as I know board members were really keen to make sure that we were. So it's really exciting space, a lot of work happening in that area, but great to have Rachel on board, and great to see some of these plans starting to develop as well. So again, I'll pause there for any questions.
That's fantastic, Rachel. And Ridian, I think, can I invite a comment from you? Because I think participation in research and innovation is a really important piece for staff retention. And I know that's a subject that we need to always bring front of mind. So I think this is a good opportunity to do that.
I'd agree with you, Rowan. Staff retention is probably the most important thing in our frontline workforce at the moment, although it seems to be overlooked by a lot of people who are in charge, who appear keener to try and get people in at the beginning of the journey rather than retain those with the expertise at the end. Anyway, that being said, it's about providing data back to the clinical leadership that is meaningful. And if we can deliver systems that allow us to expose the information that's been collected in a way that it can be easily consumed in a relatively standardized way across pathways, that learning will help clinical leadership change pathways, improve pathways, and hopefully improve outcomes. It's a key building block of what we need to do with the NDR. I think Rachel highlighted some excellent appointments within the team. She's shown very good leadership in scouring the world to find people who are prepared to come and work with a learning organisation. So she's to be congratulated.
Thank you, Ridian. And the other point to make is DGNS, its role in having our research and innovation report isn't. We are not the yay or nay about what work that gets done. That's all taken care of in different data access committees and different processes. We are much more here to scrutinise that the environment and the enabling factors that allow research and innovation to take place are in place. What that kind of prompts a question from me, which I know that the IP policy has been outstanding for a while. I think we do need to bring that back, Michelle, and I would like to see that presented at the next DGNS without fail, because we don't want to have a situation where there are questions about IP creation and what our exploitation policy or not is. So we need to have it resolved sooner and later. It may change, but let's get it in place. And
yeah, can I just come in on that before David has his opportunity. The benefit of the NDR is to deliver value back to the NHS in Wales within the family of trusted partnership and those that deliver the service. That is its prime objective. Beyond that will be the dependencies that Darren outlined earlier in his paper. And that conversation is yet to be had with the wider public.
Yeah, I agree, Rydian, and I think that point is really well made, because in the wider family of the NHS, that information will flow across different organisations. That means that has impact for almost removing the opportunity within the NHS to protect IP. I think that's actually possibly a very positive thing. If I put my open innovation hat on, working with CERN and open standards hat on, but nevertheless, I think it's something we need to do with intention rather than by accident. So it's not all about creating spin-outs and startups and all those things, but it is about being recognizing how that information flows and where the inventive step gets created, and across organizations that can be quite challenging. So thank you for that. David, your question, please.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks very much for the update. Really good to see that we've managed to recruit somebody with some really good background into the team. Look forward to seeing the report, or your plan, more detailed plan rather, around delivering the strategy at some future point. Just by way of managing my expectations, my view based on the discussion we had at the last board development session is that we're probably going to need some additional resource, possibly some new skills into your team in order to deliver the plan. Can I just check that's something that's in scope? I know we've got restrictions around headcount and budget, but are you anticipating coming to us or coming to the management team with a request for some additional resource and skills in that area?
I'll come in there and then Rachel can follow. I think, David, there's further work to be done and understood with Chris and the wider executive team about the capacity and effort that we have to currently put into the things that we're tasked to deliver through the governance structures within the NHS. I see the conversations and the presentations that you've given to us as extremely valuable in terms of bringing knowledge into the organisation. But then the next step is really to understand how we are set up to deliver the foundations first. And as you're aware, with the vacancy rate and the skill mix within the organisation and the competitive nature of retaining talent, both within the public sector and commercial services, we have some way to go there. The public may not be aware that there are severe restrictions through Agenda for Change on the financial incentives that can be given to staff to attract the best and the brightest. And no doubt the delivery of the NDR will allow us to work in a different way with trusted partners to extract that value.
No, thanks for the clarification, Rydian. I understand what you're saying, and what you've highlighted are a number of risks that are going to get in the way of us trying to deliver on the strategic mission to deliver value. So it's a conversation we need to have around, if this is something as part of our remit, it's a strategic mission, how as an organisation are we going to sort of deliver against that, and with everything else that we're being asked to do at the moment as well. So further discussion in this space, I'm sure.
Sorry, I was just going to add, so we've got a very, very small dedicated resource within the R&I team, which is worth flagging. It's not a large team at all. And one of the things that we've been doing over the last year, actually, and as part of this governance review, and I mentioned about how we've been involving other teams and directors and individuals as part of this piece of work, because we what we didn't want it to be. Although we can drive and lead the R&I agenda from my area, but we can't deliver it all solely with a few dedicated individuals. So it's trying to embed that across the organisation. The other thing that we haven't been good at previously, which we absolutely will be, and we set ourselves a challenge and we set ourselves some specific milestones and tasks in terms of what our focus will be, is how we cost recover for some of our involvement in various projects, which we've been a little bit daunted by previously, if I'm honest. I'm really fortunate that Rachel, when you head of R&I, she brings a strong background in scoping out the right proposals and funding bids, and also ensuring that this is about cost recovery actually. So where we are agreeing that we'll participate in certain activities and projects, we're very clear on what the commitment and what the capacity ask is back to the organisation, and we build that into our bids going forward. So that is something we will start to do. So look out for that coming, more of that in the future actually, but that's absolutely the territory we need to be in, so that we can build resilience and we can make this a sustainable function and approach for the organisation going forward.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you for that, and that was a really good discussion, and I look forward to more discussions like this as R&I starts to move. We're a little late coming up on our comfort break. So David, you joined just in time for our comfort break. Can I suggest we just take 10 minutes and return at 1:45? Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
I need to sort my camera out again. I've dropped my background. Let's see.
All right, Rowan.
It's been one of those days where the IT has been fighting the whole day. There we go. Back in corporate land.
Feeling guilty now.
Nobody feels guilty here, David. It was all about openness, transparency, and review. Nevertheless, I don't think people want to see my home office. Okay, I think we're almost all back. Who are we waiting for? Hello, Sam. Good to have you back.
Hi, Rowan. Thank you.
No problem. Well, I think we've got the key protagonists, and let's keep ourselves to time. So, thank you for that. Appreciate we're running a little bit late, but due, as I said to IT, we started a little late, so we're just about on track. Let's move to the next point of the agenda then, which is the digital programme overview and update, which is led by Michelle. Michelle, do you want to introduce this? And
I'm going to hand over to one of my very able colleagues again. Thank you, Rowan. So David Sheard, David is our Assistant Director of Service Transformation, and David actually leads on a number of the key projects and programmes within the portfolio that he's going to talk to us about. Some of the projects and programmes are led in other areas, but David also has a key role in the organisation in terms of engagement. So he's in a position that he can comment on all of those areas. So if you're happy with that, Rowan, I will hand over to David to take us through the key points from that paper. Thanks, David.
Fantastic. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Chair. The report is as you see it. It's the normal dashboard of RAG statuses by project and programme. There were 4 that we wanted to highlight specifically. So the first one was WEDS, the Welsh Emergency Department System, which remains red. The brief history to this is that we've been live for now more than a year in Neath Talbot MIU, but there isn't the confidence to take the solution any further, specifically into Morriston ED department. Lots of work continues with the supplier and with Swansea Bay, but also as the cover sheet says, we're instigating or have instigated now an options appraisal. We've engaged the original commercial advisor for this contract to look at the situation overall, take into account legal advice, the state of the market for ED solutions within the NHS, and also the current position of the project. There is a move to resolve our current issues that we're seeing within Neath Talbot, that we would look. There's a suggestion, a proposal, sorry, that we would move the central infrastructure out of the data centres and make it a local on-premise installation in order to resolve the issues, which goes against some of the original purposes and objectives of the project, but in terms of an operational service and helping colleagues on the right on the front line, that would seem to be a sensible option, but there are commercial, financial and legal implications or potentially of doing that. So that options appraisal will consider that. The second one I was going to mention is also
so David, is that latency? Is that the issue that you say, moving out of a data room into an on-prem?
It's an application written in Visual Basic from early 2000s-ish. It doesn't work particularly well over a wide area network. It's presented using RDP, doesn't use Citrix or that type of technology, which we would handle the wide area network better. As a product, we are the only implementation, certainly in the UK, that has such a topology. All their other sites, including 2 sites in Wales, have an on-premise installation working over a local area network rather than a wide area network and the PSBA.
Thank you. That gives me a much clearer kind of shape of the challenge that you're facing there. So thank you.
Okay. The next red one, the only other red one, is Link, Laboratory Information Network Cymru. As you, I'm sure, are aware, this has now is now hosted by ourselves, and we took on the project teams from the NHS Wales Collaborative as of the 1st of January. Work here with the supplier. There's an ongoing dialogue about the plan with the supplier and whether the plan is deliverable or not. There's been some more planning sessions this week, and they need to really be considered in the round by the programme board and considered what that would mean either to the timelines for the project implementation and the contractual implications thereof to the existing legacy supplier whose contract is coming towards an end. So this one's in this was in a poor state, as I think you're aware. We just have to watch the plan at the moment and work to that plan whilst we assess the options around it. No questions. So
no, I think we make the comment that there's a high level of eyes on this one, and you're managing a high level of risk with this particular project.
So the third one that we've highlighted there is the Powys England cross-border project, which was green and we've moved to amber. This is around our troubles recruiting appropriate solutions architect for the project. We've been out to look for employees, for contractors, etc., and have failed to get appropriate resource in there. So subsequent to this report being written, we have we've agreed. I don't think it's quite signed yet, but we've agreed a work package with a company based in Leeds who've done a lot of work in this area with NHS Digital, and so that's the way we're intended to take that. As I said, I don't think the contract's finalised, but it's looking more positive than when we wrote this. They've got a skill set and experience that is which is excellent, and there's potentially a lot we can learn and our teams can learn working with these people. So we think we do have a solution here. If that comes to pass, which I believe it will, then I expect that this will go back to green. And then the final one to note is that the Cancer Informatics Programme is green. It's been either red or amber for a long time, and this was in recognition of the November go live in Velindre Cancer Centre, where large elements of the legacy Canis solution were turned off and replaced by functionality provided by WPAS typically for administration functions, patient administration functions, sorry, and Welsh Clinical Portal for clinical functionality. I'll call a halt there. Any questions?
I have a couple. David, do you have some as well? So do you want to start?
Yes, thanks, Ron. Thanks, David, for the update. Couple of questions. So just going back to the WEDS thing and the options review, it says in the covering note it's going to go to the WEDS governance board or programme board. Is there a date for that?
No, we haven't agreed a date yet. The WEDS, the National WEDS Project Board, normally includes the well, it always includes the incumbent supplier. So we expect that we would be organising a separate extraordinary project board to consider it without the current supplier in the round.
Okay, and roughly speaking, is that weeks or months away?
I think it's probably next month. We have a very early draft of the report now. We need to make sure that that's factually correct, then discuss it with all the stakeholders.
Excellent. Okay, thanks for that. Sorry, I should have started by saying I'm really, really pleased to see the can is now green. I should have started with that, so my apologies.
So should I, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then the last question I had related back to NDR. We've got a statement in the narrative on the deck which says benefits realization initiated, which is great. Two things related to that. So whilst I think this is key for NDR, I think that piece of work potentially has broader benefits to the wider organisation. I'm thinking of our move towards products and a sustainable funding model and the value from data strategic mission we've got. So is there a timeline for that in terms of when that piece of work will be completed, and are we aware it may have broader implications for us as an organisation rather than being specific to NDR?
I'll have to go back to Rebecca Cook and ask for more detail, David, on that one.
Okay.
In terms of benefits generally, projects that are funded through the Digital Priority Investment Fund, DPIF, we have to report benefits back to Welsh Government on as part of our quarterly returns. So there'll be a standardized process, a standardized response in terms of that going back. But in terms of the wider scope of it, we'll have to come back to you, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Okay. What I was particularly interested in was my take on the realization bit is how we actually measure the fact that the benefits have been delivered, because I think if we can crack that, a lot of the other challenges we've got become a lot easier to manage. So based on my experience, if we've got a way of trying to do that, which we embed in the project, life becomes a lot easier going forward.
Yeah, those qualitative benefits are the key. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
And Karis, I know you're taking notes, so if you could just make a note of David's, well, both David's question and David undertaking to find some more information or provide more information, that would be great. Marilyn, you have a question.
Yes, I was saying, David, you were saying just now about option 3 and about us signing a partnership arrangement because you said the organisation was very good. I was just wondering, how will that partnership work?
Sorry, is this in relation to the Powys Solutions Architect?
The Powys, yes.
So it's not a partnership agreement, and my apologies if that's what I said. We've signed a commercial, or we are signing a commercial work package, a consultancy package,
right, okay.
with a defined piece of work to actually look at 2 of the information flows that we're trying to improve between Powys and NHS England, and they're going to do the solution design for those 2 workflows.
Right.
But in terms of assessing that, then if that's a successful way of working with solution designers where we struggle to get appropriate resource, then it's an avenue we can look at again for other pieces of work. The Powys piece of work, the scope of it originally was either 5 or 6 flows of information between clinicians across the border. So there's potentially opportunity with the remainder ones once we get into next year as well.
Thank you for that. Thank you, David.
David, I had a couple of questions, and the topic of the cross-border project, I think, opened up a sort of slightly more wider conversation that links back to sort of what Rydian was talking about earlier. So obviously architects are very, very rare beasts. To find good architects who can manage the complexity of health. You said you couldn't recruit. Was that partly because of the salary banding constraints or just lack of availability?
I could speculate, but it's not me personally doing the recruitment.
Right.
I suspect it's a combination, though, isn't it? It's a commercial market out there, isn't it? And within, I was going to say within the health service, but it's wider than the health service. Within the public sector, we are constrained, aren't we, in that in those terms. But also the experience we're looking for is quite bespoke in this area. So the ability for someone to come in and do a piece of work without needing someone
a lot of training to bring them up to speed.
You know, if you appoint someone for 12 months, but they take 2 months to understand what's needed, and then by month 8 or 9 they're thinking, oh, where's my next job coming from? You're probably only getting 6 months out of a 12-month contract, aren't you? So hopefully this will be a positive work package that for certain circumstances we can reuse again. But there is a hope, and the architects are very interested in this, that we can get a lot of knowledge transfer there as well, with people who've, as I said, who've done very similar work with NHS Digital across in England.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. The second question is really on the digital project that's green around Canisk. So yes. Fantastic to see both Welsh Clinical Portal and WPAS go live. That sort of delivers across 2 of the major pieces of functionality that were in Canisk, and I think that there's the MDT, the multiple disciplinary team. Group, and there's another piece in there. It might be I can't remember which bit it is, but are we having to build new systems for that, or is it more an expansion of existing services that we plan to work with Velindre to deploy in the next period of time?
Well, it's not just Velindre, I would add, okay. Because Canisk was a system that grew up in Velindre, but it was used across the cancer pathways to varying degrees in all the health boards and trusts in Wales. So the work so far is concentrated in Velindre. There has been a pilot of one element, I think, in Swansea Bay. Rydian can probably correct me, to do with a particular cancer site. But generally, we are expanding the functionality within Welsh PAS and Welsh Clinical Portal, and improving integration with other systems as well as part of the solution. I'm going to let Rydian take over because he knows more than me.
Well, thank you, David. Cancer is a condition of a individual, such as is diabetes or cardiac disease, or a bruised toenail. It's just so happens that the cancer community developed a cancer-specific way of recording stuff. We're moving away from that to a holistic viewpoint. Welsh Clinical Portal has functionality which is useful to clinicians who deliver cancer care, but there are bespoke requirements that we have had to develop and will continue to develop, particularly related to radiotherapy services and, to a certain extent, chemotherapy services. There are, of course, 3 cancer centres around Wales, and we have to be cognizant of engagement with all of those users. And in addition, there's the palliative care community who use Canisk, and there's some of the screening services that use Canisk, and therefore that's why we're not off it completely. We're also dependent for the legacy data migration for some of the important Welsh Government mandated HCRIP audits and the new ones that will come online. It's good progress. It's not finished, but it's definitely going in the right direction. And there's been a tremendous amount of work internally and with cooperation in Velindre to manage the change management element of the digital program, which, as I'm sure you'll be aware, is often bigger than actually delivering the software.
It's definitely the bit that returns the value from the software is seeing it used. And Rydian, I know you've shared some of the fantastic feedback we had from the first phase of rollout more widely with the board. So thank you for that. That was really useful. Are there any more comments on our digital programme overview? Thank you. Okay, well, we'll move on now to a review of IG, information governance and cyber security training across the NHS from Darren Lloyd. This is a public-facing opportunity for us to share some of very high level work that committee generally does in private on cyber. It's also a bit of a setup for, I'm sure, more conversations in this afternoon's private session. So Darren, thank you very much for leading us on this topic this afternoon.
I'll be as quick as I can, Chair, given the time. I know we're slightly overrun. So effectively, this is just to give the committee a bit of assurance that we are looking more collaboratively across some of the main aspects we consider around kind of statutory and mandatory compliance for individuals who are operating within the sphere of NHS and other public services predominantly. So effectively, the story is we have statutory and mandatory training in information governance, cybersecurity, and to a certain degree, health records management. There's been an opportunity to actually revise some of those aspects, either through contractually, through some of the cyber work that's been done in terms of reaffirming the need to have concise training around cyber. We all know that that is very much, a key element moving forward, and there's been a lot of actions around the cyber. Also, as well, that as a community of practice from an information governance perspective, that our statutory mandatory training, internal training, has required some revision, because it's based on some old technology and old platforms to do that and deliver the message in a more coherent and cleaner and more up-to-date, user-friendly and way, and also that the importance of aspects like health records management and records management need to be conveyed by those individuals who are operating within that sphere. So effectively, what we're doing is we've revitalized certainly the training around the IG message, reaffirmed that commitment for the cyber knowledge to be properly distributed, and then made it more known about the importance of that kind of health records and that records management function within the organisations. So there's an opportunity. So we've worked with shared services to reanimate certainly the information governance, the information governance story and the requirements as part of a collaborative approach with health boards, trusts, and other stakeholders to create the storyboards and to create that as part of the training package. So we would have hoped to have completed that by January. There are a few delays because the records management element hasn't been completed, but what effectively we're going to distribute is, we're saying that all of those things are inextricably linked as part of a onward process of learning. So the intention is to distribute new statutory and mandatory training that will have the headline of cyber, IG and records management together. And they will be separate modules within those, but it means that the revision of some of this work will be completed over the next couple of weeks, I would hope, possibly 4 to 6 weeks, so that there's a new package being made available to individuals who are part and parcel of kind of the service provision. Again, it reinforces the things that we've previously described about the learning aspect and the importance of those particular disciplines and that professional, and more importantly, for individuals to know where to go when they have issues or they do not understand where that challenge may be around those particular areas. So reinforcing the message that there are those professionals available in those organisations to go to, and those users or those other individuals in the health and social care space do not necessarily have to work it out for themselves. They know where to go. So that's essentially it. It's a progress of where we need to be around our statutory and mandatory training.
So I think that's great, Darren, and I think it's also excellent to see us working, as always, across the wider NHS family to work in a common way against these common obligations and the common threats associated with cyber. So thank you for that. Any comments on Darren's In presentation, overview? No. Okay, excellent. All right. Well, we're just about on time. So are there any other urgent matters of business that need to be brought to the committee now? I'm seeing shaking your head. So items for highlight to the report to the board today. I think you know, we've had a very good discussion. I think, Chris, I'd like to highlight the fact that where we are with a number of risks coming off the risk register. So I think that's very, very positive. You know, I think we've discussed, you know, a lot of standing items on the board, and you know, I think it's a testament to the maturity of the organisation that many of these assurance reports now are coming forward in yeah, very well presented. Clearly, the processes are in place that yeah, and the workflows are managing to deliver on those. So, I think that's it. Rather than the substance, it's the reflection that the organisation is on top of these matters. Are there any other aspects that you feel that the chair ought to highlight to the board that we've discussed this afternoon? No, okay. I think that's the key things, and I have on the excellent set of chairman's briefing notes, and I'm going to thank Caris Richards for producing those for me. Is to confirm the date of the next meeting, which Caris says is Thursday, the 11th of May this year, and we'll start promptly. IT and internet provide issues notwithstanding at 1 p.m. Thank you very much. We've now got a 10-minute break, and we will start our private session just a fraction after 20 past. Thank you, everyone.